Let's do this.
It's time for Hanging with Langan.
I like that she's got a big dirty mouth that gets her in trouble.
Wow.
Stop me, 'cause I'm having a good time.
Hey, you guys, it's me. It's Maureen Langan. How are you? You're hanging with Langan. That's right. We are going to have a delicious show for you. My friend, she used to come on. She was a regular on Hanging with Langan when I was in San Francisco, and I love her. Her name is Jen Briney. She'll be with us in just a moment. She hosts a podcast called Congressional Dish, and it's what it sounds like. She dishes on Congress. This woman is so smart, down to earth, fun. She just said, look, I was a nonpartisan, tax-paying gal who just wants to know what the hell is going on in Congress or not going on in Congress. I mean, she reads bills and like a lot of stuff and semicolons and subtext, a lot of that. But she's really on top of all of it. So we're going to talk about Jim Jordan and the other chap who were kicked off the January 6th commission. And we're also going to talk about Jeff Bezos and that whole phallic moment. What the heck is going on with these guys? I am telling you, Jeff Bezos went into space. I don't give a flying fuck. I just don't understand any of this. I get the outer exploration, but this adoration from everyone, ours, the media covering it nonstop. Soledad O'Brien, a very bright woman, she said it's an embarrassment, and I absolutely agree. Yes, herald him for a few moments, and let's move on, because I believe we have to take care of people on Earth first. Then we can go and like take care of Jupiter or, get codependent with Pluto because it's no longer a planet. But for the love of God, go to a soup kitchen and help a woman there who's single with a few kids or I've seen all that. So anyway, that's what bothers me about it. And I'm angry because I miss the good old days when rich white guys would just buy baseball teams and steal another guy's wife. That's what you're supposed to do. So we'll get to all of that. Totally want your comments. Want to hear everything. And that's what we do here. We're just hanging. And we're not going to get crazy. I mean, I might, but you don't have to. Do me a favor. If you're watching this on the Facebook, on the .com, as my mother calls it, please share it. Just click share and ask people to watch. That's how we grow the numbers. We're also on YouTube Live. And all of this gets uploaded, the audio, to all the major podcast platforms. So I want you to subscribe there for free at Apple, Spotify, all of that. I also want you to, you'll go to Patreon. That's Patreon. And that's where you folks subscribe beginning at $5 a month. And I'm listener supported. That's why I'm like PBS, but without Ken Burns. That's what I am. So that's what I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear what you think about Hiya Charlotte. Want to hear what you think about Bezos and going. There's so much to talk about with him. We'll get to that. I want to start though with a breaking story tonight, and the breaking story. McCarthy. He's pulled 5 GOP members from the January 6th commission because Pelosi rejected 2 of them. Yep, the House. That's what he did. So we're going to talk about the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy taking all of them off of the commission. What's going on here? So let's bring in a buddy of Hanging with Langan, Jen Briney, Congressional Dish.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Remember you used to come in the studio with me when I was in San Francisco?
Yeah, I do. I loved doing that. It was so fun. You guys had snacks. And I could bring my husband and my dog sometimes. Like, we had a good time.
You could have brought wine. Not that I would drink it. I'm just saying to bring after the show.
Yeah, it was after for sure.
So listen, I know that you're really on top of all of this. I mean, I email you. You're like, Maureen, got it. I'm like, hey, did you see this? Already saw it. So let's talk about what's going on. This January 6th commission wants to look into the Capitol riot, what was behind it, what was the cause of it. How do we keep something like that from happening again? Who's responsible for it? That's my understanding. That seems like a normal thing to do. So what's going on with steroid-infested, seemingly, Jim Jordan? That guy scares the crap out of me. He reminds me of the football player in high school who would beat up the special needs kids because he was too infested with steroids. All right, so talk to me. What's going on? Give us the lowdown.
So I have a not mainstream take on the commission because I have been doing an episode for the past, I've been working on this for like over a month, on the January 6th situation. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is there have already been over 11. Well, I know there's been at least 11 hearings that have already taken place about January 6th in the House and the Senate. And I've watched them. They were very, very long. The Senate investigation was amazing. Democrats and Republicans working together, talking to people on the Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police, National Guard, Department of Defense. I mean, they asked amazing questions. And I feel after watching all of those hearings that I know exactly what went on. So after doing all of that, I feel like Pelosi's commission is completely unnecessary because I do think yeah. I think that the investigation has already shown us that it was a security failure because that was a rally that marched towards the Capitol. And the part that is making it such a big deal is the fact that they were able to get into the building. If they didn't get into the building, we wouldn't be calling it an insurrection. There wouldn't be all these charges. The fact is that these people got in. And I look at it as an amazing failure by the Capitol Police because the vast majority of them were not armed. The FBI confirmed that they had exactly one person that got into the building that has been confirmed to have a firearm. The rest of them had like Trump flags and stuff that they found on the ground outside. So the Capitol Police was unbelievably unprepared. And what I found out is it's because they didn't train for anything like this. The Capitol Police, they're all siloed. And so different divisions were in charge of their own training. There isn't an overall training division that's like, oh no, if you don't get trained, you don't get to come to work today. They were all training themselves, and they had never even done any training of like, okay, what if they get into the building? Which is why when they got into the building, no one knew what to do because they had never even drilled it before.
Okay, so I can hear that security was a huge breach, a really huge problem. However, I think perhaps you're it seems a little downplaying when you say only one person with an arm got in there. These people had a hangman's noose ready for hence. They were like a mob going in there. This isn't like, oh, these people had poles and they were knocking over cops and one's trapped in a door screaming for his life. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's more than one person got in there. There was a mob mentality out for blood.
There was one gun that got in there. There was definitely weapons. There was chemicals. That was really disturbing as I was watching it live on some live streams. You usually see the chemicals coming from the cops to the rioters. I've never seen the chemicals going from the rioters to the cops. Uh-huh. So it definitely was more than, a tourist visit, as one of the idiots said. But it was a riot. And we've seen riots in the Capitol before. The idea that they were coming to hang Mike Pence, I mean, if you actually look at that thing they constructed outside, they couldn't hang my 8-pound dog, Abby, off of that thing. It wasn't. What they were saying in these hearings is that there was an 80-20 split, and this was the FBI saying this, where 20% of these people were like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and they actually were there to cause some trouble. But then there was this mob mentality that took over. A lot of the people there were not intending to go there and mob the Capitol, but then when the opportunity arose, they were excited and they went in. There were 46 members of our military that went into that building out of 800 people. And so one of the things that I'm taking away from the entire January 6th situation is that it's a very nuanced situation that was done by Americans that were lied to by the commander-in-chief. And I think that's kind of getting lost in this too, that there's a lot of focus being put on the individuals that went into that building. But they were people there were cops, there were members of our military, people that pledged an oath to the Constitution that thought that their government was being threatened. They thought an election was being stolen. And so I just learned so much, and I don't feel like I have any questions left after 11 hearings. And I
wish we knew all this. Why haven't we been privy to all this? Why is this so hit? This is why I love you. But why don't we know this? And I will say, because I want to move forward with what you're saying, because it's very valid. It sounds like you're saying they believe they were protecting America in some way because they had been told America's being taken from them. Now, hurry up. Look what they're going to do. My mother always says their intention may not have been to hurt people, but they did. And my mother will say to me, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You are responsible for what you do. So what was the catalyst for your doing that is part of it, but you're doing it in and of itself. is one aspect of it.
Yes. And we have plenty of laws on the books that are being used right now to prosecute these people. So there's a lot of people that are being charged right now with blocking an official proceeding, because when you look at the intention, a lot of people that went into that building, they did want to stop the election certification, but their intention was to do that in order to save their country, not to overthrow the government. So I do think that matters.
Okay.
And you can see that there hasn't been a single person charged with insurrection or sedition or treason, any of the most serious charges. And so they are getting charged with vandalism, assaulting officers. I mean, we have charges, and they are going down, they are hunting these people down all over the country and charging them with existing laws. But I, like you, was shocked by how many hearings have already taken place. I knew of 5 until I started to work on this episode. I found 11, and I was shocked at how long they were. There was one in the house that was 9 hours.
But who was holding these hearings?
So Amy Klobuchar, I don't have my notes in front of me, but she chaired one of the committees. That was probably the best hearing that I saw. It was a two-parter in the Senate. Yeah, that one was really well done. And I do have to say that people on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, were asking really good, informed questions, trying to get real answers. It wasn't a partisan shit show. The House was a different situation. Carolyn Maloney, she did a 9-hour hearing where she's calling it an insurrection. That's where that whole, like, it's just a tourist visit. That's where all of that came from. And as I watched the dates, because I watched all of these hearings in order, the closer we got to January 6th, the more serious the investigation was. The further we got away from it, the more partisan it got. And so I feel like members of Congress have the information that they need, because if I found it and I don't have any more questions, they have it too. But I think with the commission, I think the Democrats want to keep it in the news cycle for 2 reasons. I think one of them is they want to run on it in the midterms. And so they need this investigation to keep going. They need the news to keep talking about it. The second reason is there are a lot of bills that they have wanted since before January 6th that are aimed at expanding spying powers for instance, like the FBI, other parts of the FBI in particular. But they also want censorship powers, and they have been pushing censorship.
How so?
So back in, like, before Trump was voted out, he was on Twitter saying all kinds of crazy things and making our country and our world total chaos, and they wanted to shut him up. They also, you can see with COVID, they're all talking about misinformation. And you can see that they are wanting what they call misinformation, whatever they label as misinformation, to be taken off of the internet by the social media companies. Now, government censorship is one thing, but it's also very unconstitutional for the government to direct private companies to take things off the internet.
Yeah, I have issues with that myself. But then what do you do when the holding fire in a movie house? But if you're in a movie house, what, in 1940, you're in a movie house. But Jen, is there any responsibility for information to be accurate or not? It just doesn't matter, because people don't read. They don't look at well, they read, but they aren't looking at sources. They're not looking at the horse's mouth like you are. They're looking at things that are on the internet and think it's just absolutely true just because they saw it there. I'm so against censorship. I even had some issues when they took Trump off Twitter, but then I realized and I still want to get back to this, if he's responsible for this, would you not call it an insurrection? You wouldn't. You would call it a riot.
No, in fact, I get a little crazy when people call it an insurrection.
What would you call it?
I'm calling it a riot, because I think that's I think that's the accurate name of it. When it comes to insurrection, I think insurrection's kind of the worst case scenario. And I know that the Capitol Police and the people that were responsible for security really want to call it an insurrection, because then they can be like, this was so extreme that, like, what were we supposed to do? But this was not the worst case scenario. This was a riot full of people armed with flagpoles. This was not people that came there.
I think there's somewhere.
When I found out what weapons were actually brought, I was legit surprised at how few lethal arms were brought. Like, when I think of an insurrection, I think of what's happened to other countries where people come with guns and tanks and real firepower. These people did not have that, and they still were able to get to the Capitol.
They had a rage at a level. Rage and human bodies can do a lot. Like, their level of rage on those faces, I have no doubt, if that cop was stuck in the door and they had no problem with that, and they were hunting down, they were going to hunt down anybody who was going to vote for the election. That's scary to me. Does it have to only be guns?
I'm not saying that it wasn't serious. What I'm saying is it doesn't rise to the level of worst case scenario insurrection. It was a violent riot.
A violent with the goal to do what?
I think the goal was to obstruct the congressional proceeding, to stop the certifying of the election. Now, they're idiots because they didn't realize that the certifications had happened in the states, and so they were actually obstructing something that was ceremonial. That just shows you how little they know about our system. Some people didn't even know what the Capitol was. They thought they were at the White House. So we're not talking about smart people here. We're not talking about overwhelming firepower here. And yet they were still able to breach the Capitol and get that close to our congressmen. So what I'm looking at is we got so lucky that they didn't bring their guns. Because if they wanted to do that, they could have mowed down those cops that were clearly outmanned by 800 people. That's not even that many. I thought it was far more when I saw the videos, but they're saying 800 entered the building. If they did come with
that sounds like so many to me. It's so funny. 800 sounds like so many. If 800 came at me now, I'd be like, holy shit, there's 800 people coming at me.
But I just know that the Capitol Police have over 2,000 officers. We also had plenty of National Guardsmen. So it's like if we had enough law enforcement standing by so that they couldn't even get near the building, they couldn't have gotten in and they wouldn't have threatened our congressmen.
But didn't Trump have to trigger that and say send in the National Guard?
So he had already given the authorization in the days prior, and that was a main sticking point for me. That was one of the main questions I had and why I watched 11 hearings, is I wanted to know, did Trump stop law enforcement from going in there? And in fact, Trump's ego was so big that he was going around to the Department of Defense and being like, we're going to get tens of thousands of people. Are you ready for this? It's going to be huge. You better be ready for January 6th. So he actually gave the Defense Department all the permission that they needed.
So where were all these cops? Where was this National Guard? Where were they? Because I didn't see them.
So Defense Secretary Chris Miller and the Secretary of the Army did something that was very weird, which was that they withheld the authority for the National Guard commander in D.C. to make his own decisions. So this was the defense secretary ultimately. And the way that he described it, and I'm not justifying what he said, but this is what he said. He was basically saying that after the June 2020 BLM protests, where a lot of us, including myself, were really pissed at the level of firepower used against the protesters. And in the run-up to January 6th and after the election, in that period, a lot of us were really concerned about how Trump, as commander-in-chief, was going to use the military. And so in that situation, he was afraid that the DC commander would have boots on the ground there and that it would be interpreted as the military is being directed by Trump to do whatever. Like, they were concerned about the optics. They actually said that day. And so there was a delay that was unusual. The DC commander is clearly angry about it.
But do you think they would be concerned about the optics if those people were black? I mean, they were concerned. So here's Carl Yard. Carl's a good guy. He's so funny. Carl is a comedian, and he happens to be African American. He says, serious question. What if that were a mob of black people? Do you think the death count would have been higher? I think your guest is downplaying the incident. I think a little bit. I would agree with that. But I come from a different perspective, so I want to hear Jen, because she really is impartial. She's bringing, I don't think you have a pony in this show.
And I just want to make it clear that it's the definition, it's the using the word insurrection that I think is inaccurate. I think that the riot was awful. I hate how many cops were abused. I mean, especially knowing that there was law enforcement officers in the riot doing that to their own. Like, that was infuriating. I'm not downplaying the incident, but I'm saying it wasn't an insurrection. And the reason that I want us to stop using that word is that those were Americans that did that. Those were people that were lied to by their commander-in-chief. They thought they were saving the government, not overthrowing it. And I think that matters.
But then you're saying, if that is the case, because I think I've watched him for 4 years, so I watched him whip everybody up crazy. What you're saying that he had empowered the military and the National Guard to be there. So I don't understand this Kevin McCarthy begging him to do something, and they said he didn't.
Well, there was a lot of mixed messages. So the members of the military were saying that the National Guard had been mobilized, But the Secretary of the Army wanted a plan before he would send the National Guard in. Now, the DC commander said,
plan, stop. Make them stop. That's my
exactly. The DC National Guard commander said that he would have had everybody there in 20 minutes. Just everybody get to the Capitol, go to whoever you see with any kind of authority and take their orders. Like, that's what should have happened. And so the breakdown there's a lot of permissions that were needed on that day that were unusual, that were not directed by Trump. This is something I think we can put on Chris Miller, the Secretary of Defense. But there were unusual levels of permission, and also weird stuff that happened before, where the Capitol Police, they were actually approached by the Department of Defense that said, do you need us on standby? And they said no. Paul Irving, the Sergeant at Arms in the House of Representatives, said, we're going to be fine. We don't need any armed National Guardsmen standing by. The DC mayor asked that any National Guardsmen in DC not have weapons available. So there was a lot of decisions made beforehand that were downplaying the risks on January 6th that had repercussions on that day.
But were they downplayed? And I think Carl has a good point. Carl makes me laugh. You have to see some of his posts of how what happens to him because he's black. They're very... I hope I'm a white person he doesn't hate, but he makes me laugh. He doesn't hate all white people. He was just at Home Depot and he tells the cashier, I have 10 red bricks. And he said the white guy behind me, I believe it's 11. I think you miscounted. And then they both start counting all his bricks at Home Depot and he had 10. He's like, yeah. So Carl has, rightful issues with some people. I'm just bringing him into the conversation. I do wonder if part of the feeling of we don't need all this backup power, I'm wondering, is it because they felt safe because they looked like them?
I have the same suspicions, and I don't know. But I have the same suspicions, and I don't like it because I've marched in those BLM protests plenty of times. I mean, I was living in Oakland, and I was out there all the time, and I know exactly what it's like when the police respond to a riot. I've had to hide in the BART subway. Like, I've been there. I've seen it, and the lack of preparation for this one, that's what it makes me furious to find out about it. But we do know what happened.
I want to give a plug here. Jen Briney is my guest. She is the host of the podcast called Congressional Dish, and you can go to congressionaldish.com and also support her and me. There's two ways you can support. There's a platform called Patreon, Patreon. And when you go to Patreon, you support artists and people working independently like Jen Briney. So you would go to Patreon and just search Congressional Dish, or you would search for Maureen Langen, Patreon, and she's at congressionaldish.com. All the information's on her website as well as mine. And like $5, $1, $10, whatever you do, it really keeps the programs coming. And I also want to say too, I know you, and I know that you really research very deeply. So some of the things that we just lost her. She'll be back in a moment. Some of the things Jen says, I might find myself feeling defensive and go, whoa. But the thing about her is that you can have a real conversation because she does the research. She's waving to us. I was saying, you're not somebody who has this agenda. You do the work and then you bring forth what you have found.
Yeah.
So that's why you started Congressional Dish, to bring these things forth. Yeah. So I'm hearing a few things. Some of the things I'm hearing here are the Capitol was woefully, just even before this, unprepared to withstand any kind of confrontation in general. Mm-hmm. Number two, they were worried too much about the optics that they did not send in more backup. But
they were worried about the optics to the point that they wanted to have the people at the top, the Secretary of the Defense and the Secretary of the Army, give permission before anything was done, to a point that they were micromanaging the DC commander of the National Guards to the point that they could have been there at 2:30 or by 3, let's say by 3. They could have been there by 3 and instead they were sent at 5. So there was a micromanagement happening on the National Guard level that was unnecessary and
can't be. But why? Why were they doing it? Why were they so worried at that level? Why weren't the people proud? Because if William Barr and Trump could come out with a Bible and start pelleting, is that a word? Start chucking pellets. I screamed when I saw that. Like when I watched what happened before the Bible, Upside Down Bible show.
Well, members of the military felt like they were used as props in that Trump photo op. So they were worried about that. And then what Chris Miller said, which I actually kind of agree with, was that the military should be the absolute last resort. And so he wanted to make sure that the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Department were taking care of it, because it really is their job. And they were saying over and over again, and when approached before January 6th, we've got this. We don't need your backup.
Okay. And then once they did need the backup, though, that's what I don't get is the lag time. It was clear. I'm watching television, and I know they need backup. You know, like I'm looking at this. So that's what I don't understand then, is at that point when you clearly see they need it, even though they did not say we don't need it, what was that 2-hour delay?
So the Capitol Police Board kind of overrules everything that the Capitol Police does. And there's a lot of permissions that aren't granted until they declare an emergency, and they refused to declare one before January 6th. So there were permissions that weren't automatically granted on their side, including for the people in DC, for the Capitol Police, to call in the National Guard. They didn't have those permissions. And then, like I said, on the other side, in the Department of Defense, they were requiring more permissions than is usual from the higher ups. So it was a cycle of permissions that was gumming up the works. And from what I heard, it was more incompetence because Trump didn't play any role in it. They had all the permissions that they needed. That wasn't a factor. It was just Chris Miller and the Secretary of the Army. They wanted to make sure the National Guard had a plan, or the commander's like, we don't need a plan, just send them to the Capitol. Like, it was micromanagement. If I had to explain it one word.
I have a hard time believing seriously that Trump, as the president at that time, I know he was probably watching it and sense around.
Oh, in glee.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say. Like, do you think, couldn't he as the president say, get them in now? Did he not have that power?
I mean, the permissions that he would have given would be to tell the Secretary of Defense, like, send in the National Guard. That was already done. So Trump, I mean, could he have done more? Of course. He could have taken to Twitter immediately and said, stop it. I mean, he definitely had the power to do this. And I think we're not putting enough blame on Trump. I mean, one of the things I found out is that the rally wasn't permitted. So, like, Donald Trump as being the head organizer of the whole thing. I mean, we have all these people in the riot that are being charged with conspiracy, rightfully so. But Donald Trump is the one that called him out there to begin with, and he staged an illegal rally. So why is it that we can be charged with these, felonies on a smaller scale? Why can't Donald Trump? Right there, that's illegal, because that was not permitted to even happen.
What do you mean permanent?
Permitted. So like
permitted. I'm like,
yeah, like when you have a protest, I participated in protests in DC, and every one of them had a permit, but nothing was allowed in that period around when the election was being certified for obvious reasons. But Donald Trump did it anyway. And I just don't think we've ever dealt with this idea that the president of the United States would be the one that would be having the illegal protest and being the one that would be lying to the people that are under his command. Like, there was a lot of these people that looked at the commander in chief and they believed it all, going,
well, they still do.
They still do. And so that's the other reason that I don't want us to exaggerate the branding of what happened that day, because these are people that believed all of it. George W. Bush lies about the Iraq war, and they went to fight it. These are the people that bought it all. They believed the Republicans' bullshit for so long, and now they know they were lied to. There's an opportunity here for us to reach out to these people and be like, listen, we know you were lied to. Serve your time. You did some dumb stuff. And then it's more than the 800 people that were in the riot. There are so many people that believe it too. They are now seeing the lies. And I think there's opportunity there if we resist the urge to use our anger and call them insurrectionists and terrorists. And these are Americans that they're our neighbors, and they were lied to.
Okay. It sounds like you have not empathy because you...
It's empathy.
Well, no, empathy would mean you experience the same thing. I mean, you sympathize at what they've been put through, but you don't want to make it a greater injustice, or...
I just don't want to exaggerate. what happened, because it's going to lead to censorship laws and to more surveillance powers. I think that is, I've seen the bills, and I haven't read them yet. That'll be my next episode.
We'll come back.
So
You'll come back. Well,
absolutely.
Because
because during these hearings, they were naming bills one after another, different names. They have a whole list of what they
I don't
want to
want censorship. I may hate what you have to say, but I want to hear it.
Exactly.
So, okay, just let me, because still trying to get this clear in my head, because you've been following all of these. Jen Briney, Congressional Dish, that's her podcast. She's so accessible. You guys, she's really great what she reads and brings forth. So, we get told a certain number of things in the media. She's watched 11 hearings about the riots. So,
thank you.
You're saying, well, the insurrection. But I still think, I look at those crazy guys, and they're all angry white guys with their faces and everything bulging and the rage on their face. It was like Charlottesville. It's that intense, disturbing anger that's frightening to me. They would stop. What they've did to people was horrible. Whether they got caught up in the moment or not, you're still responsible for yourself, which we agree. The thing, though, Trump is there and sits around in glee watching all of this. I have no doubt. McCarthy calls him and says, do something. That's my understanding. So you're saying the National Guard was there already? That Trump...
Yeah. The National Guard had a quick response team, is what they call it. They had like 150 people, and the DC commander says that he thinks it would have made a difference. He could have had them there in 20 minutes. So that was available right away.
But they weren't, you said they were called out or they were available. Were they activated or no?
So that's where the confusion comes in. There was a call that happened around 2:30 that day, kind of when this was getting started. That call should have been the catalyst where 20 minutes later, the National Guard should have shown up.
Right, that's what you're saying, right?
On that call, it was perceived that they were not being given permission to send in the National Guard, but the National Guardsmen or the people in the DOD are saying that they were mobilizing, but they weren't going to send them in without a plan. And then you have this gap of about 2 hours where the timeline it's off and they're disagreeing about what exactly happened. But from what I understand, on the Department of Defense side, they were making a plan and then doing all these different authorizations. There was also a half-hour gap there between when the official authorization went from the Defense Department to the National Guard, where the message just didn't get there, and they don't know what happened there. So there was communication issues, which also happened on the before side too. There was an FBI report that they were trying to give to the Capitol Police that might have led to more preparation that just never got to where it needed to go, despite the FBI doing everything they could. So there was a lot of problems structurally in DC and just the hierarchy of power in these situations that was exposed through this. And I think they know enough now we could act without then taking it to calling Americans terrorists and censoring the internet. I don't think that's necessary.
Well, I don't want censorship, and I hear you with that. Though I do wonder if people should be responsible for misinformation. I mean, I was a journalist for years. I couldn't just put out fake news. You have to do your due diligence. Is there not a responsibility, ethically, morally, professionally? I mean, are there any standards that they should uphold? That's not censorship, but that's accuracy. That's vetted.
So I'm so glad you brought this up, because they've also had a lot of hearings that are deeply disturbing where they haul in Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg and the heads of these social media companies and grill them about what you should be doing. And what I've noticed is there's a lot of problems around the algorithm. I feel like they could not censor our individual posts, but instead stop getting involved with what we see, because they're designing their platforms to be addictive. So if I do have a member of my family who is all QAnon. She believes it all. She's in her 80s. She's wheelchair bound. I think that's why I have empathy for these people, because she's in my family. And what is happening is she's obsessed with Facebook. And so she comments on one of these QAnon posts. And so they feed her more and they feed her more and they feed her more. She doesn't see my stuff. She doesn't see the pictures of the kids. She doesn't see her friends that aren't insane. She's only seeing, they're feeding her what she's looking for. And all of a sudden, she thinks reality is what's on her Facebook page. She doesn't understand the algorithm. She doesn't understand that she has, let's say, 1,000 friends on there, but she's seeing 10 of them. It's not that the other 990 aren't posting. She's just not seeing it because of their algorithm. Twitter's doing the same thing. YouTube is doing the same thing. So I feel like if we were to change the laws for social media, it should be chronological. We post what we post, but this way we can see what everybody is posting. We don't have these platforms determining what we see to our own.
So you want to eliminate or limit the algorithms?
I think that would help. I do. And there's a lot of experts that all these hearings, they keep coming back to the algorithms. And of course, Facebook and Twitter, they want to keep the algorithms. Like, it works for them. That's how they stick in their ads. That's how they figure us out.
Right.
But I think that's what's damaging. And I've seen it in my own feeds, like I'm not seeing people that I follow on Twitter anymore. And I know they're posting.
Interesting. That's interesting. Very interesting, because I think their censorship, no good. So not into that.
And what they're talking about in these January 6 hearings, like the FBI not only wants to censor, but they want to get into encrypted communications. So like they want to have backdoors into Signal. There's some talk in the Biden administration about going into our text messages somehow and letting us know if we're being misinformed by text message. And January 6th is being used as the catalyst for all of this.
I see what you're saying.
These rioters were texting each other, and like in order to prevent it from happening again, they have to prevent us from speaking to each other without them watching and being able to intervene.
I see what you're saying. This is scary.
Yeah.
But that is scary. And what's also scary is to look at what people consider news sources and have so much misinformation about things medically, politically, all over the place. This crazy QAnon. So there has to be, I believe, some standards in order to operate. As a journalist, you have standards. I brought that up before. And there just has to be certain lines in the sand about how one operates. How do you find that? I don't know. You brought up a good point about that. So I want to move on in a couple moments, but I want to finish this riot situation. So Trump did not have a permit. Beyond that, does he hold any more accountability? Will he be held accountable from what you've seen in these hearings?
I feel like the focus has been shifted away from him. Like they're shifting it to us as if we're the danger, we're the domestic terrorists, we're the problem, where Donald Trump can still be president because they botched the impeachment so badly. So I would like to see him held accountable, even if it has to be just a bunch of little charges like the illegal rally. There's also one of the parts of the impeachment that made me insane is that we have him on tape pressuring election officials in Georgia.
I know.
To give him exactly the number of votes that he needed.
I don't understand this.
I don't either. So it's like, go after that.
Why aren't they? I don't understand this.
I don't know. Even conspiracy. Again, they keep charging the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, as they should, for their role in calling people out to Washington, D.C. But there was one man that they were calling to that rally. There was one man's name on all those flags. So why has he now suddenly been allowed to just send us where
I don't know
and run for president?
I do not know. I don't know. It's mind-boggling to me. But you said there's all these hearings that you've watched, 11 of them, talking about these riots in the Senate and in the House, yes. But have they been partisan, bipartisan, or they only been held by Democrats? Because you say you don't believe there needs to be a January 6th commission.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering why I would like to see a bipartisan, but then you have crazy people like Jim Jordan, who's going to kiss Trump's ass no matter what. He just got booted. He's not going to be on the commission, along with another chap. But he's gone into it saying this is a witch hunt for Trump.
Yeah.
So
and he was on some of these committees already. Every single committee that I watched that's had a hearing already, every one of them has been bipartisan. They've all been chaired by the Democrats because the Democrats control the House and the Senate. But Republicans have participated in every single one of them. So,
but participated in a way that wanted to get to the truth, or participated in a way where Jim Jordan's head was exploding?
There was both.
Okay, because
there was both.
Get to the truth. I don't give a crap if you're a Democrat or Republican. Well, I kind of care if you're a Trumpster. But I want to know what really happened. And we know what happened. I mean, is it really that much of a secret? He whipped up his base. He told them to come out. He said a year before, if I don't win, it's because of fraud. It's because of fraud. So But if he wins, everything was great.
We know what happens. We know what happened. And when it comes to the hearings, the Senate hearings were really good. The Republicans, some of the clips I'm going to play in my next episode, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all 11 hearings, and I took clips from all of them, and I'm going to put them in order that makes sense. And no one has to take any of my word for any of what I just told you. Like, you'll hear the testimony yourself. But the Senate testimony was really good. And the questions from Democrats, Republicans, I couldn't tell the difference between the parties. It was really nice.
So then what does that lead to? What is that? What is the end result of all of that? Jen Briney of Congressional Dish, the podcast available. Go to her website, congressionaldish.com, and Patreon, Patreon, where you support people like her and people like me doing our own work. You're welcome.
Well, I mean, I would like to see the DC, the Capitol Police structure changed, because I think they have this Capitol board that makes weird decisions and really doesn't empower the people on the ground to do what they need to do in the moment. So I think they're a problem. I think the training is a huge problem. I think the Capitol Police needs to have a training division that determines what the training needs to be and ensures that everybody gets it. No more like each group gets to do their own training, which means that they're basically policing themselves. That's nonsense. I think the DC mayor needs to have the ability to call in the National Guard, because right now it's the president and the Department of Defense that controls the National Guard. If this had happened in any of the states, it would be the governor that's in charge of the National Guard.
But because it was Washington, D.C.
That's why the Department of Defense is even involved.
Okay.
So that's a very easy solution that's being kicked around, and yet it's not being done yet.
Okay, that's one solution. But in terms of somebody, I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm stuck on Jim Jordan because he makes me crazy.
Oh, I know, he's the worst.
He's the worst. If he won't acknowledge, or people won't say aloud, that Biden won legitimately. What do you do about that when you have people like that crazy Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you have people like Jim Jordan? There's a number of people. So what do we do about that as Americans? It's huge to me. I
think it's our responsibility to fire them.
Yeah, we won't. We're trying to hire more, I think, Jen. So, okay, but in a nutshell, Nancy Pelosi would not accept Jim Jordan on the January 6th commission. This was the lead-in question. We still haven't answered it, as well as another chap. Who's the other fella?
So that was Jim Banks, I think his name is. I did write it down. I've never heard. Yeah, Jim Banks of Indiana. Those two were rejected by Pelosi. You know, what I found fascinating about this, because the commission's happening, so let's just, get over my feelings about its necessariness or not. McCarthy had picked 5 Republicans, and one, of course, is Jim Jordan, and he's just partisan and gross, and, he's very unlikable. Jim Banks, I know nothing about him, but the two of them did vote to not certify some of the election results on January 6th. And I assume that was the reason they were picked. But there was another guy, Representative Troy Nels, he's a new representative, who also voted to not certify the results, but Pelosi deemed him to be okay. So her statement wasn't clear at all about why she picked these two. And she kept telling the press, like, look at my statement, look at my statement. I read it. I was like, I don't know.
I know. I want to know what the statement is. I'm wondering, though, because those two have come out. I've read a lot about Banks and Jordan. They have come out since January 6th, just supporting what happened, what went down. Maybe supporting, just not condemning is a better way of putting it, I guess. Yeah. We'll see. I wish it would be. But then Liz Cheney, if there's been all of these hearings, she seems very adamant about the need to move forward.
Yeah, and Liz Cheney, I haven't seen her in any of the hearings, or at least I was listening to all of them. So if she did ask questions, they didn't make an impact on me. But like some of the clips that I'm playing are of people that were trying to they were trying to defend sort of what was happening that day. But their questions did lead to some answers that I felt like I needed. So, one of them was like, how many guns did we find in that building? That's how I found out it was 1. And I think that matters. So even if you do get an obnoxious blowhard like Jim Jordan on the committee, and even if he does try to distract, I mean, that's what he does. This will be a January 6th commission. He'll talk about BLM. He'll talk about the border. He'll talk about whatever is on his brain. Like, he's obnoxious. But there might come something of his questioning that could backfire on him, or maybe some answers that we needed that are uncomfortable, but we needed them anyway. Or maybe he just wastes all 5 minutes of his questioning. Who cares? Instead, now the Republicans are like, well, we're not going to seat any of our people. And I kind of see their point in that. Like, who is she to tell them who they can pick? And especially for reasons that it seems like it was things that they said that pissed off Pelosi, because it certainly wasn't their actions. It wasn't their January 6th actions. Otherwise, Troy Nels would have been one of the
Well, she
bandits.
said that. She said, you're right. She said that's not necessary. That is not why I read her statement, which you said doesn't make sense. I have to read it. I have not read
She
it.
doesn't say anything specific about them. She just, this was the worst thing since the Civil War and January 6th was bad and blah, blah. She doesn't say specifically that this is what these two did, and therefore I have decided they are disqualified. She doesn't say that.
I still want to know what McCarthy said when he called Trump. I want to understand why Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, all afterwards said this has gone too far. This is a bridge way too far. The president has to be held accountable. And now they don't say that. And by the way, he lost the election. So they're pinning all their hopes. They're pinning the tail on this donkey when, I mean, he's not a donkey, but they're pinning their hopes on him again. And I feel like the bully is keeping all of them tethered to him and frightened. If they all said this was wrong, whether you like him or not, people said when Hillary didn't get elected, you can't get over it. I said, I can't get over it. I cannot get over the fact that Trump won. But listen to my words, Trump won.
Yeah.
I cannot get over that she lost, but I know he won. I wasn't in a delusion about that. I was in pain, but I wasn't in a delusion about it. So I would like to see all these fellas and some women are like, it was wrong. And now they're like, look, you're making a big deal that you want to use it. I think there's somewhere between the Democrats using it toward ends that you and I talked about that are not good, censorship, and keeping it just in the limelight for political purposes. I think there is the need to do something together. And you're saying it's happened. Well, let's put a bow on this. Let's show this. Let's bring this to the American people for answers. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I don't feel that there's been some kind of closure on all of this, or even I know what their conversation. Why don't I know what Kevin McCarthy and Trump talked about? Aren't I allowed to know?
I don't know that we're ever going to know. Honestly, I mean, they can pull him on the stand, but and the other thing is too, when you look at the structure of the command that day, I now know that it doesn't matter what they talked about because Trump had already given the authorizations. Like when I was sitting there watching this on January 6th, I was thinking, is Trump stopping the response? Like that's what I was wondering the whole day. Like why isn't the National Guard in there? Like, I remember on BLM protests, I mean, they are chanting in front of the White House and they get cleared with rubber bullets. So like, where is the National Guard? Is Trump the one stopping it? Now I know he wasn't. So regardless of what McCarthy said, I mean, they were pushing him to go on social media and do what he eventually did extremely poorly and tell his idiots to leave.
Yeah, but he went out there and said, "You're good people, and I love you." That's freaking nuts. You're good people, and I love you. I love you. I love you, and I love Kim Jong-un, and I love Putin, and I love Helsinki, and that's what I love. I hate John McCain. I hate Gold Star families, but I love you, and I love Charlottesville. All right, I can't. What I want to get to now, Jen Briney is my guest, Congressional Dish. Just want to give you guys a couple shout outs. I have some gigs coming up. Woo-hoo. I will be at the Bedford Playhouse in Bedford, New York on August 6th. I will be in Seabright, New Jersey on August 5th. And Bay Area coming to you in San Rafael at St. Vincent's School for Boys on August 28th. And then I'll be up in Washington State in the middle of September, and I'll fill you in on a bunch of those gigs. But go to MaureenLangan.com. You will see that. And I also ask that you consider supporting the show because it's listener supported, viewer supported at PayPal or Venmo at Mo Langan. And I'd love it if you would or consider subscribing monthly beginning at $5 to patreon.com, Maureen Langan. And I'll even send a certain level of Don't Make Me Hate You t-shirt because I don't want to hate people. They make me hate them. And of course, you can support Jen Briney, congressionaldish.com. You can support her at Patreon as well, and Venmo and PayPal. So this is what we do for a living, you guys. We work like dogs. This is a whole new world. But before I let you go, we have to spend a few minutes. See, I went, oops, where am I? Maureen Langan. There we go.
We're going to the dick ship.
Yeah, we have to. The dick show, is that what you call it?
The dick ship.
The Dick ship. Yes, I have a little clip here. Jeff Bezos. I love him. The guy is a skillionaire. You want to go into the sky and back? Go for it. I felt like I was watching a bunch of frat boys heading to Cancun. It was absolutely insane. I just couldn't believe, like, you had people like Armstrong and John Glenn who people who spent years and years and years of their life dedicated to space and aeronautics. If that's what I'm talking. I was in English, whatever. And this guy was big swinging dick, goes up in the sky. The media covers it for hours. Everybody's clapping like it's a keg party. Everybody's doing luge shots. But here's a little clip. He thanks his employees who I have a problem with so many things. Here we go, Jeff Bezos.
And then I want to thank every Amazon employee and every Amazon customer, because you guys paid for all of this. So seriously, for every Amazon customer out there and every Amazon employee, thank you from the bottom of my heart very much. It's very appreciated.
Okay. Am I supposed to be impressed that a billionaire went to space while he paid zero in federal income taxes some years, and the workers at his company struggle to afford their medical bills, rent, and food for their kids? Nope. It's time to invest in working people here on Earth, which could have been said by any number of people in America, happened to be said by Social Democrat Bernie Sanders, but I agree.
And yeah, I mean, he should have thanked American taxpayers too, because who's making up the difference in the crappy wages that he's paying and all the sick leave that he doesn't pay? And oh, that's us. Like, the fact that his workers need welfare payments, like, it's the rest of us that fill in the holes, and he uses the extra profits to go to space. And it's fake space. It's fake space, by the way, too. He didn't even go to space. He went just out near space.
It's like
not even a space station.
You put your toe. The Sicilian and I were at the Jersey Shore yesterday, and he dipped his toes because he's afraid of sharks. And he's a manly man. Like, you didn't go in the ocean. He told my father, yeah, I went in the ocean. Well, you didn't go in the ocean. You didn't go in the ocean. Stop it. And this reminds me of him going to space reminds me of the actor Jeremy Piven doing stand-up comedy. Everybody thinks they can do it. Everybody thinks they can do this. No, you're not an astronaut, Jeff Bezos. And again, he wants to go. Go for it. That's your right. My husband and I felt it was a bungee cord right, Charlotte. Very good. I will tell you this, though. Here's my big issue with him. Again, it's your money. You do as you please with it. However, it's also our money. And this chap, Representative Earl Blumenauer, I don't know how to say his name. He's from Oregon. He's a representative there. He's on the Tax Writing Ways and Means Committee. He proposed legislation to tax space travel for non-scientific research. He says space travel isn't a tax-free holiday for the wealthy. We pay taxes on plane tickets. Billionaires flying into space producing no scientific value should do the same, and then some. I like that. Here's my problem with Jeff Bezos and Amazon. He's representative of so many companies, and I'm actually mad at the employees because they voted against their best interests and they did not vote for a union. And they said that he treats them well. She'll be back. He treats them well. They like their environment. Most of them like what they are getting there. So I don't know what packages everyone gets. I do know that in the warehouse, the average wage is $16 an hour, which comes to about roughly $30,000 a year. They should be a comedian if they want to make that much. So when people vote against their best interest, and here she's back, she's at a hotel somewhere in Boulder. What I was saying is that people are voting against their best interest by not unionizing. Warehouse people make $16 an hour. That equals about $30,000 a year based on 40-hour weeks. So I don't understand. People will say, well, he treats us well, or the environment's good. Not everybody. That's why they didn't vote for the union. When you don't unionize, you are at the mercy of your benevolent dictator. You don't have the collective bargaining power. If your boss treats you nicely, you're treated nicely. Guess what? When you have a union, you're telling your boss, you're treating us like this, or we're out of here. Mm-hmm. So this is what they
empower themselves by not voting to unionize, for sure.
But the Republicans did very well by calling states right to work states. Who doesn't want the right to work? They have great slogans. Very
Yeah.
good.
I want the right to have enough money so that I don't have to work all the time. Like, that's the dream. And
Or
to have
pay your
healthcare
bills.
and to have, the ability to be happy and not be paid slave wages. And Amazon is just notorious for treating their workers terribly. And I think we're so used to being wage slaves that we don't realize how badly we're being treated. It's not normal to have to work 50, 60 hours a week. Like, that's a weird American thing. I remember I lived in Europe and someone told me that Europeans, they work to live where Americans live to work. And
Yeah.
that always stuck with me. Like, our work ethic is unhealthy.
Well,
We
that's right.
accept more than we should.
I remember when I was in a newsroom, one guy would stay there 15 hours a day, and I think it's because he hated his wife. I don't know why, but I would put in 10-hour days. And I remember my news director said, if you can pump out a few more stories, he's here. He pumps out like 15 a day. I go, he's unhinged. Is that the goal for all of us to be like him? He's unhinged. Jen, I love hanging with you.
I do too. Thank you for having me and let me go off about my insurrection problems.
But you know what I love about you? Some things I agree with, some I don't, but I know you come from an informed, prepared place. And your opinion matters to me because I know it's not based on just emotion, though you might have an emotion around it. It's based on the information that you know.
Oh,
Then-
thank you. And I love that even when we disagree, we're always friends. And I feel like if the country could function more like you and I do, then we'd be in a much better place.
Well, but I hear your information. So it's a catalyst for me to look into more of that. I don't go, oh, she's wrong. What have I disagreed with you? At the beginning, I thought you were downplaying it a bit, but then when I realized where you're coming from and what your perspective was. So it's a respect thing, but it's more that I know you do your friggin' work. So that's why I respect you.
Thank you.
You'll come back and hang with me?
Anytime.
You promise?
Yes.
I want, after you get what's your next thing you're working on Congressional Dish?
So the next episode is everything we talked about with the insurrection. I watched all those
You
hearings.
called it an insurrection. You don't want to call it that.
Well, no. Yeah, that's you're right. You're right. You got me there. But everything that we talked about with January 6th, I grabbed the best clips from that. And so everything that I learned, I'm just putting it in order to kind of tell the story through the testimony.
Great.
So that's the next one. And then the one after that, I collected the names of all the bills that they talked about, and I'm going to read all of them.
Will you come back? I want you to come back and put those in a nutshell for us. Folks,
Sure.
follow Jen
Be done by
Briney.
mid-August.
You come back. I adore you. Jen Briney, congressionaldish.com. Go to her website. See ways that you can support her because her stuff is brilliant. Subscribe to her. And all of this is just listener supported. And her work is friggin' fantastic. Thank you, my darling. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
And I hope you guys please consider supporting me at MaureenLangan.com is my website. I have it up and running now, doing a lot of corporate hosting, speaking. So if you want a comedian or a broadcaster to bring the right tone to you, to your show, please go to my website, check it out. Follow me there at MaureenLangan.com. You can just sign up. I don't stalk people. And again, one last pitch, go to Patreon.com if you're so inclined to support the show, or PayPal or Venmo at Mo Langan. And my gigs, August 5th, Seabright, New Jersey. August 6th, Bedford, New York at the Bedford Playhouse. August 28th, I will be at the St. Vincent School for Boys in San Rafael, California. And then in September, mid-September, and I'll post more about it, I will be in Bellingham, Washington at a great theater there. Woo-hoo! All right, you guys, until we meet again, let me put this up there. Bye, wig. Mwah.